It's time for CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, and TuneIn. The easiest thing to do is tell Alexa or Siri to play CBJ in 30. Here's your host, Bob McElligott.
Yes, the midseason vacation is over. The Blue Jackets returned to work yesterday afternoon, practicing at the Ohio Health Ice House. They will do it again today and then board a plane and head to Buffalo. And game action resumes tomorrow afternoon between the Blue Jackets and the Sabres. Welcome to CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. I'm Bob McElligott. Coming up in just a bit, you're going to hear from Mike Harrington, who covers the Buffalo Sabres and the NHL for the Buffalo News. The Sabres have already gotten a couple of games under their belts after coming out of their break, and it has not been good for them. I will just tell you that. It has not been good. And is that good news for the Blue Jackets tomorrow afternoon, or is it not? I don't know yet. We're going to find out as we go along here. But first, I want to tell you about Telhio Credit Union, because at Telhio Credit Union, they have some of the simplest things to make your life easier. Maybe it's just a checking account you're looking for. Maybe it's a savings account that you're looking for. Just want to take care of your personal banking. Maybe you're looking for a debt consolidation loan to try to get all of your affairs in order and just make one payment every month. They can help you with every one of those things. They also have different levels of those things with different perks that you may not have even thought about being connected with any of those types of things. And to find out about all of it, all you have to do is go online to telhio.org. Now, that's the personal stuff they have. Maybe you have a small business. Then that's a whole different category, but they can help you with that too. So go on the website, look around, surf around. The information as to why you should join a credit union is right there. And that is maybe question number one in your mind. The answer is there for you. The services are there for you. All of the information is there for you. If there's something that you're still unsure about, something that you can't find, something you want to know more about, and you just don't have time to get out and go to one of the local Telhio Credit Union offices, well, during business hours on that website, go on the right side of the screen, there is a chat option for you. There's a live chat option. You just click on that, and you can have your questions answered right there at that time. They make it so easy. And you know why they make it easy? Because they want you to join with them. They want to be with you. They want to help you with the financial part of your life. Telhio Credit Union. It's open to everyone in Central and Southwestern Ohio, and they are federally insured by NCUA. All right, let's get to it. The Blue Jackets skated yesterday. Josh Anderson was on the ice with the team. Now, will he be ready to play this weekend or not? That is still a little bit up in the air. We'll find that out maybe this morning. Maybe it's a day-to-day thing. We'll have to wait and see what goes on there with Josh Anderson, but he was back on the ice with the Blue Jackets today, so that's good news. Another injured player, another key injured player that looks like he is close to returning to the lineup. Jonas Korpisalo is not close to returning to the lineup yet. I had kind of warned you of that the other day on Monday when I was going through the mailbag for you. Matisse Kivlenieks had been sent to Cleveland so he could play during the break. Kivlenieks was called up yesterday. He again will serve as the backup to Elvis Merzlikins as the Blue Jackets get back to action. Then, of course, right away, people are saying, I saw yesterday, social media, where everything is always true. Yeah, right. People speculating as to whether or not Kivlenieks will play a game this weekend. I'm going to tell you, I don't know, but I don't think so. I really don't. You're coming off a 9-day break. I think if Elvis has a good afternoon, and this is a key, they're afternoon games. If he has a good afternoon tomorrow, he can bounce back with another afternoon game on Sunday in Montreal, a place that he has already made a start this year, Montreal. He didn't get the desired result there, but he did make a start there and has some experience in that building. But we'll wait and see how it all shakes out. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But the Blue Jackets are returning to action tomorrow for the first time in quite a long time. And they're taking on a Buffalo Sabres team that lost last night to the Montreal Canadiens, 3-1 the final score. Brendan Gallagher had been out of the Canadiens lineup because of illness. He returned last night. He had the game-winning goal. The bright spot for the Sabres, Jack Eichel scored his 30th of the year, but even Eichel in his 30 goals have not been enough for the Buffalo Sabres, who started the night 10 points out of a playoff spot and could have themselves in real hot water by the end of the weekend. That is for sure. The Blue Jackets would like to just pile on to their troubles tomorrow afternoon in Buffalo. Speaking of that, yesterday I had a chance to catch up with Mike Harrington. He is a fine hockey writer for the Buffalo News. He also covers the NHL as a whole, covers Major League Baseball, does it all. He's been doing it for a long time. He's a great guy. I want to warn you before I play this interview, and I apologize. I don't know why it's like this, but there are some glitches in it, and it's not perfect, but the information in it is really good. So I ask you to bear with me and listen through. You'll get a lot of information about the Sabres. You get some good outside perspective on the Blue Jackets and how they are seen in the NHL by everybody outside of Columbus and surrounding area here. All of those things. And we'll talk a little trade deadline before it's all said and done, too. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. Mike, at the beginning of the year, the Buffalo Sabres, they were on fire. I mean, just winning, pulling out to a big lead in the Atlantic Division, and then, I guess similar to last year, went cold. And, right now are struggling to get into the playoff picture. They changed a lot of things. They changed their coach during the offseason. What does this franchise, the Buffalo Sabres, need to do to get it together? Can they get back to where they were at the beginning of the year?
No, and they're not going to get there. It is funny. We joke about how they have the banner in the arena for best team in the NHL at the end of November last year, and they can have it one for this year. Best team in the NHL at the end of October. That's the only banners they win around here. They simply have not put their game together. They have a star player in Jack Eichel. They haven't gotten enough goaltending. Their defense isn't good enough. They've had key injuries to Jeff Skinner and Victor Olofsson, and they just kind of spin their wheels. They've been up and down this year. They've had a couple good stretches. They've had a couple bad stretches, and they never really put anything together consistently. And they were kind of in this thing even right around the new year, and then all of a sudden you look up and they're 10 points out. They had their bye week, and they sat for 10 days, and teams kept winning like Florida and the Leafs and the Blue Jackets, and now they're in a double-digit deficit again, looking for year 9 out of the playoffs. Incredible as that may seem.
And as you said, one of the things that even makes it more incredible is that Jack Eichel is part of that team. Because if you go back to the Connor McDavid sweepstakes that year that McDavid was taken first overall, the Sabres didn't get the number 1 overall pick, but they got the number 2, and it seemed like quite the consolation prize. I mean, it was like you can't miss with either one of those guys, but yet the Sabres haven't been able to capitalize on having that big star player. How much of that is what's around Jack Eichel, and is there any of it that is Jack Eichel himself?
There was some of it maybe that was Jack Eichel a little bit in his earlier years. He wasn't a superstar player like everyone thought he would be out of that pick in the draft, but certainly now he's one of the top 7 or 8, 9 players in the league, and if they ever got in the playoff race, he'd probably be a Hart finalist the way he's played this year. You look at it, you've got Jack Eichel, number 2 overall pick. Let's not forget, Sam Reinhart was the number 2 overall pick in 2014, the year before. Rasmus Dahlin was the number 1 pick in 2018. And it still hasn't lifted this team up. Ristolainen is even a top 10 pick. Casey Middlestad's a number 8 pick, but he's down in Rochester. They've had enough draft picks to win here. They haven't gotten great picks at times, and they just haven't put enough around these guys.
And they've gone through a couple of coaches already with Jason Botterill as the general manager there. How much is that kind of hurt in a way of, not having the continuity? I guess if one coach would have worked out, they would have continuity, and that hasn't happened. But now you're on Ralph Kruger, so that is there was in the last couple of years, Dan Bilesma, Phil Housley,
well, yeah,
and now
think
on
back
to Ralph Kruger. Yeah.
Go to 2013 when they fired Lindy Ruff, Bob. You went Lindy Ruff, Ron Ralston, Ted Nolan, Dan Bilesma, Phil Housley, and now Ralph Kruger. That's too many coaches in a 6.5, 7-year period. You're never going to get any continuity there. They're on the third GM, Darcy Gear, Tim Murray, now Jason Botterill. Botterill's certainly under the gun right now and under fire, and they've not developed any sort of coherent plan, and one of the reasons for that is the constant switching in management and coaches.
Talking with Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. The Jackets getting set to take on the Sabres coming out of the 5-day break. That'll be tomorrow afternoon in Buffalo. And, Mike, you mentioned earlier injuries have been a problem for the Sabres. They suffered one earlier this week. Linus Ullmark, goaltender, goes out. So Carter Hutton had to go in and make start against Montreal last night. Hutton was a guy that was struggling pretty much coming into that start with 0-7-4 going into that start. And he's a guy that is – he was a backup goaltender. They brought him in, hoping maybe he could be a starter. But what's gone on with Carter Hutton in his time with the Sabres?
He's kind of been reflective of the team this year. If you think about it, he started 6-0 in October. and then went into that Montreal game, like you said, in an 11-game losing streak. Just hasn't made enough saves. I mean, sometimes goaltending, we can make it too complicated. You got to stop the puck. You went into that Montreal game, 7 out of 8 games, 4 goals or more. You're never going to win if your goaltender can't make the bailout saves that you need every so often. So, to me, Hutton's a veteran guy who's been mostly a backup in his career. They brought him in on a free agent deal thinking he could be the starter, and he just hasn't been able to do it. And now they're kind of stuck. I mean, Ullmark's out 3 to 4 weeks. It looked like some sort of knee situation where he got his skate caught in a rut in the crease. And they've got Jonas Johansson, their AHL All-Star now, in the lineup here. They've got their top goalie prospect, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, now in Rochester, and they're hopeful for him as the number one guy in the future. But right now, the goaltending had not been a question the way Linus Ullmark had taken over. Other things are a question mark with this team. Now their goaltending is a big question. It's another thing that they just have no answer to now.
Speaking of goaltending, to stay on that subject, have you been surprised with what the Blue Jackets have been able to do without Sergei Bobrovsky to have him walk and go join the Florida Panthers, and have Jonas Korpisalo, who would have been an NHL All-Star had he not gotten hurt, and now have this Elvis Merzlikins almost come out of nowhere, a guy that couldn't buy himself a win at the start of the year, to be on quite the role that he is right now. As an outsider, outside of Columbus, and a guy that follows this league very closely, are you surprised by what's happened in goal here in Columbus?
You don't want me to break out into love me tender, do you?
Well, no. Maybe I do.
Well, in Buffalo, funny enough you say that, when they win a game, they play a video of Gilbert Perreault back a few years ago where he grabbed the microphone and started singing Elvis is the Wonder of You. So maybe the Blue Jackets ought to be thinking about that as a victory song, every time they win a game with Merzlikins. But yeah, just in general, the Blue Jackets are a surprising goal, but they're certainly, to me, John Tortorella is one of the 2 or 3 top candidates right now for Coach of the Year. This team should have been nowhere with all the roster subtractions they had in the wake of last season, but I think what it shows is coaching matters, player development matters, and winning matters. Guys got a taste of what it meant to win last year, win in the playoffs. And for the ones who remained, that carries forward. I mean, look at the significance to their careers, guys like Nick Foligno and Seth Jones, to experience that kind of victory against Tampa and that series afterward against Boston, how that can carry over. And I think that's a factor we're seeing. And that's what I say a lot about the Buffalo Sabres. By never making the playoffs, Jack Eichel and Jeff Skinner and Ristolainen and Reinhart never, ever get that experience. Bobby, right now, the 2 players in the NHL who've played the most games in their careers not ever appearing in the playoffs both play for the Buffalo Sabres, Jeff Skinner and Zach Bogosian. That's a huge problem.
And what happened with the Blue Jackets here, Mike, is when they went through their injuries, and you're right about John Tortorella. I think he would be the lead guy for the Jack Adams Award right now if Pittsburgh hadn't gone through all those injuries earlier than the Blue Jackets did, because I think Mike Sullivan did a good job there too. But, when the Blue Jackets had dipped into the American Hockey League, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know how much talent was there. I didn't know if they were going to be able to sustain injuries to guys like Cam Atkinson and Oliver Bjorkstrand and Josh Anderson. But what happened was the guys that came up just played a much more simple game, a much more hungry game. I think the Blue Jackets, who had gotten away from playing you mentioned they beat Tampa with a good, hard, grinded-out style last year. But quite frankly, after the arrival of Artemi Panarin and then, adding a guy like Matt Duchene near the end of the year, they got to be a little bit more of a finesse team, and they were trying to rely upon skill instead of hard work. And I think early in the year, losing those guys, they forgot that they had to get back to the hard work. And I think the call-ups from the American Hockey League and guys just trying to play hard and make an impression helped to get them back to their team identity. But you and I have, spent a lot of time around the American Hockey League as well as the National Hockey League, and you know how valuable that is to have those guys there. Let me ask you this. You mentioned like Casey Middlestat back in the American Hockey League, Rochester. What is the depth there? What is the talent level there? And are those prospects getting what they're not getting in the NHL with that wing? Are they getting that in the American Hockey League?
Well, I mean, some depth really isn't there. They don't have a lot of great prospects in my eyes in Rochester. Lukin, obviously, the goaltender is a great prospect. They're hopeful for Middlestat. They have a couple defensemen. But I'm a big believer in this, Bob, and you know from our baseball backgrounds, too. I'm a big believer in winning at the minor league level. And the Sabres, we want to win in Rochester, kind of like Botterill did in Pittsburgh at Wilkes-Barre-Scranton. Well, they haven't won in Rochester. They haven't won a playoff series. Let's not forget what the Lake Erie/Cleveland Monsters have done in recent years. I mean, they have a relatively recent Calder Cup on their shelves in Cleveland. And I think you saw this year, some guys came up and they played like monsters, if I can use that cliche there, and it makes a difference. You develop a winning attitude throughout your organization when you bring them up to the NHL they know how to win. And the Buffalo Sabres don't know how to win in the NHL. And right now, the Buffalo Sabres don't know how to win in the American League either. The Rochester Amherst got off to a good start and really scuffled again and are just fighting to make the playoffs. So, and they're thinking, we want to win Calder Cups. I'm thinking, you guys can't be talking to winning Calder Cups. You got to get in the playoffs first. And they can't win a series. They can't even win a game. They got swept by Toronto last year. So I think the Blue Jackets development shows that. We've seen that in Tampa, the way they've won in Norfolk and Syracuse. It makes a difference, and Buffalo has not achieved that.
Talking with Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. You know, it's funny as you're talking about that is I'm a hypocrite in some ways, to be honest with you, Mike, because all these guys come up and they played so well for the Blue Jackets, and the break comes, and, you know, guys are healthy now. Atkinson's back, Bjorkstrand's back. So they'd send players back. Then the break comes, and there's no NHL hockey going on, and the Monsters are playing. So, you know, I was kind of tracking the last couple of games they played, and all of a sudden I looked at the standings, and I hadn't done that. And I couldn't believe how far down they were in their division with the performances of the players that I just saw come up here and play. But you also know it's twofold, too. If guys have a little taste of success in the National Hockey League, that can transfer back. As long as you don't go back and pout that you're back in the American League, if you take that experience and use it the right way, it can benefit you a ton.
Yeah, it can. I mean, you're right. I mean, and some guys may not be happy to be there, and they've experienced some success, and they kind of feel stuck in the minor leagues. And it's not a great year right now, obviously, in Cleveland for that club. But you're right. I mean, they came up. The Blue Jackets got the infusion that they needed, especially when the injuries were going on, and it makes a difference. And they have to be happy about their development in Columbus this year based on the impact it's had on the NHL club, even if the AHL club isn't doing as well in the standings as they would have hoped.
All right, there are two Buffalo Sabres players I want to ask you about because there's a little bit of turmoil with both of them. Zach Bogosian is one, Evan Rodriguez is the other. What the heck's going on with those guys?
They both asked to be traded. Whatever. Evan Rodriguez asked to be traded at a time when he had exactly 0 goals. Does him and his agent really think some team would trade for a guy from Buffalo who's played more than 20 games with 0 goals? What do you put in that press release? We just traded for a guy from Buffalo with no goals. I mean, how naive are you? How out of touch and tone deaf are you? Zach Bogosian, same thing. Hasn't been playing great. He's had some good games, some bad games. He's making, what's his cap hit? I mean, almost $5 million. Who's trading for Zach Bogosian at a cap hit of almost $5 million?
Has that those situations? How's that affected the rest of the team?
It's hard to say. I don't think it's affected the team a lot. I think guys are understanding. I think it affected the coach more and the GM more in their dynamic because Ralph Kruger came out and said, we only want to play guys who want to play here. And then all of a sudden, and they sat, and they should sit eating press box popcorn next to me and never see the ice again. But all of a sudden, they were back in the lineup again. So that kind of reeked of the GM saying, put him back in lineups so people see him playing. So there seemed to be a little bit of a disconnect there. But I do know that, Kruger was asked again this week about that, and he said, and Botterill said the same thing. He talked to the media this week. The players met with us. We told them we weren't happy that they were talking in the media. They wanted out. They have worked hard. Bogosian in particular has some value. He has a physical presence. He can help them on the penalty kill. So the Sabres, I would just be, you're done. You're sitting in the press box. You're going to rot. The Sabres maybe have a little less chip on their shoulder, a quick trigger than I might. And they put him back in the lineup. And, Rodriguez had a 2-goal game in Detroit. And Bogosian's had some moments. But, whatever. Neither one of them are going to be on the team next year anyway. If somebody wants them for a bag of pucks or something, I suppose they'll trade them. But there's other guys here more people want than those two.
As you look at things right now with a little over 30 games to go before the end of the regular season, the Atlantic Division, no surprise the Boston Bruins are there. No surprise the Tampa Bay Lightning has come back to prominence. The Florida Panthers, they went out and they paid Sergei Bobrovsky a lot of money to get into a playoff spot, and they are there for the moment. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, are a little bit shocked. How do you see that Atlantic Division playing out? I guess the further question is this going to be the year where you get 4 from each of the divisions in the Eastern Conference?
I think that's going to be the ultimate outcome here. I think the Leafs have finally started to figure it out. They'll get enough goaltending from Frederik Andersen to get them in. I don't think they'll get very far once they're there. Florida is a high-scoring team. They got a lot of firepower, and Quendel's playing a good style. Will their goaltending hold up? Bob hasn't been good down in Florida, especially at that price.
Yeah, but if you can score 6, you don't have to be that good.
Score goals, you don't have to be that good. I don't I'm not a big, and I'm not saying this because I'm on your podcast, I'm not a big believer in Philadelphia. I think it can be a 4-4. I think out of the Metro, you are looking at Washington, Pittsburgh Islanders, and the Blue Jackets. And then in the Atlantic, you are looking at Boston, Tampa, Toronto, and Florida, and those are your 8 teams. I don't think Buffalo's going to make it. I don't think Montreal is going to make it. I don't really, the Rangers, no, I don't really buy Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is going to be one of the outliers here. I think the wild cards are going to be Carolina and Columbus, and then we'll see. I'm sorry. I think, I don't know. See, I just contradicted myself right there, didn't I?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Carolina because where are they, and how is the Dougie Hamilton injury going to affect them here over the next couple of weeks?
I think Carolina's in trouble because of the Dougie Hamilton injury too. I think Columbus is positioned the best to be a wild card out of the Metro. I think they have the best team right now. They're getting healthy. If if Elvis is going to be, Jordan Binnington light, the Blue Jackets are going to the playoffs. They may not go to the Stanley Cup final, obviously, but they're going to get there. I think they're well positioned right now, and I think Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo has a shot. I mean, they still think they do. They're 10, 12 points out, whatever it is. The only shot they have, like any team in their spot, the only shot they have is they suddenly win 8 or 9 in a row. And if they do, they'll get back in. And I always tell people this story, Bob. We were in St. Louis last season. It was the first game after Christmas break. It was December 27th. Nondescript game in December. The Sabres at St. Louis. Do you know that night the Buffalo Sabres were 15 points ahead of the St. Louis Blues?
That's quite a bit. And what happened after
15. That? And we know what happened after that. So anything can happen here, but I think the Blue Jackets are in great position. The Buffalo Sabres are not.
What about the Montreal Canadiens? I mean, this is a team that last year missed by a point behind the Blue Jackets. This is a team that has $10 million a year wrapped up in its goaltender, and yet they're sitting where they are. And again, you see a lot of them because you're in the same division. What is Marc Bergevin thinking there as he's trying to set up that team for the future?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's more what every other GM is thinking about the Montreal Canadiens. And I think the lesson there is no matter how good he is, you just don't build your team around a high-priced goaltender. I just don't think you're going to do it anymore. There's very few teams that are going to do it. I know Fleury's paid in Vegas, but, the Montreal Canadiens have paid too much money to Carey Price. It's hard to build their team. They don't have any real stars. You're not going to tell me Brendan Gallagher or Max Domi's a star. Their team is Carey Price, and it can't be Carey Price forever, but they've overpaid their goalie. It hamstrings your ability to build the team. I don't know what Bergevin's going to do. I mean, how long is Bergevin going to be in his job? Is he going to keep Claude Julien? I mean, they got a number 3 pick. Kotkaniemi's a nice player, but he's not a game changer per se. Just a very blah team. I think somebody said it's like the first time in a long, long, long time that they're going to go 3 years in a row out of the playoffs, maybe ever. I don't know. I have to look that up, but they're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, last year the Blue Jackets made Sergei Bobrovsky quite an offer to stay here, and I like Bobrovsky. Obviously, he's a 2-time Vezina winner, and you didn't know what you were going to deal with if he walked away. But the fact of the matter is, this league has changed, and you can have a goaltender. You can pay $4.5 million to a goaltender and win a Stanley Cup. And especially if you're bought into the team defense concept, and that's what we've seen with the Blue Jackets over the past 6 weeks, it's been the team concept that has actually helped the goaltenders. Look, don't think that Elvis Merzlikins all of a sudden figured it out overnight. I mean, it was a lot of practices, and all of a sudden the team playing much better in front of them than they had before.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. The Sabres are striving for that. The Sabres talk about structure all the time. And some days they have it, and some days they don't. The Columbus Blue Jackets are a team that play with structure. John Tortorella is a coach that is all about structure, and you see it. And I mean, it helps to have talent. It helps to have Seth Jones back there, but he's got them going again. And the thing is, the Sabres go haywire for 5 or 6 minutes in a period, and Kruger's admitted he struggles sometimes to get them back. Tortorella is able to get his team back after a bad shift or two at times. You do see the difference. It doesn't take an intermission for John Tortorella to snap his team back during a game, and I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's because, as you well know, he doesn't finesse it, right? I mean,
Nope.
You're going to know it. Whether you like it or not, you're going to know what's on his mind.
when the Sabres play the Blue Jackets, obviously when you're in the press box, you always have binoculars anyway. You're checking out injuries as a guy off the bench or whatever. When the Sabres play the Blue Jackets, I'm always looking at Columbus's bench just to see what Torrance is up to down there. It can always be entertaining.
Let me ask you again from an outsider's point of view, because we're really close to it here, and I get spoiled by watching it. I'll be the first one to admit it to you. Do you feel that Zach Werenski and Seth Jones are the best defensive pair in the NHL right now?
Boy, I'd have to ponder it, but yeah, I mean, because they're in the East, when I'm watching games in center ice, a lot of times I do watch the Blue Jackets games, and it's a pretty good pair. Most teams would want to have one of those guys. The Blue Jackets have both of them, and you can't underestimate what that means when you're talking about building a team. Those guys are so sound with the puck, and they can skate, and they're physical, and it's just, you love watching them play, and that's something that teams really strive to have. And Buffalo's got Ristolainen, and they got Dahlin, but Dahlin's not that physical yet. He's still 19, and Ristolainen's been up and down. This has been a much better season for him, but you still, at times, he can lose his mind out there. They're just so consistent with Jones and Werenski in Columbus, and it's a huge thing for them.
Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. I'm going to ask you one more thing, actually kind of a two-part question. Trade deadline, that's the new focus now coming out of these breaks. Only a couple of weeks to the trade deadline. Number one, how active do you think that this year's trade deadline will be around the league? Number two, there's a lot of teams talking about wanting more hockey deals instead of rental player deals. Do you think any of that comes to fruition?
Yeah, I think it might. And actually, one of the best ones at the deadline last year was made by the Buffalo Sabres. They traded a number one draft pick to Anaheim and got Brandon Montour, a young defenseman who had played in the Western Conference Final, who had term in his deal. Those are the hockey deals. That's not a rental. That's a good trade for a team to make as they're trying to build their franchise. And I think a lot of teams are going to hope to make a deal like that. I mean, there's enough rentals out there. I mean, the Buffalo Sabres have a ton of rentals that are going to be available. If you want Connor Sheary or Zemgus Girgensons or Johan Larsson or Jimmy Vesey, they're all here on expiring deals, and you can have them. And, I say especially Sheary, who's won 2 cups, and Girgensons has been pretty good this year, might find a new home here because they have some value. But hockey deals would be great. I just think the cap really hamstrings teams here, and the cap was lower than people thought. And we don't get a lot of those hockey deals now until we get to the draft when the guys start talking. I'd love to see more of them. Credit to Jason Botterill there. I've been on him, deservedly so, for a long time about how bad the Ryan O'Reilly trade was. But he might have made one of the best trades at the deadline last year, getting Brandon Montour and getting him with term. So we'd like to see more of that. I think a lot of teams would.
Well, to end it on a happy note, I guess if you want to feel better about the cap situation, at least you're not the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right, and the Buffalo Sabres are going to be a team to watch because they should have around $34, $35 million to spend this summer. So this might be Jason Botterill's last kick at the can here to fix this roster, but he's going to have the ability to do it, whether he wants to make some trades and continue to open up more space, see what's out there in the free agent pool. He's going to have a chance to do it, and he's going to probably add Dylan Cousins to his roster. His number 7 pick last year was one of the standouts for Team Canada at the World Juniors, and he's tearing up the Western League at Lethbridge. So that's another guy to add. I think the Sabres, you don't have a lot of confidence based on the way this last 10 years have gone, but they do have a chance legitimately to make a big jump next season. Doesn't help fans right now as they're slogging through another season, probably not headed to the playoffs, but that's their last hope. They'll add cap space and see what they can do this summer.
That is one great point, though. The fans in Buffalo, and I know they're probably feel beaten down in many ways. And actually, you just made me think of something. I do have to ask you one more thing. The Pegulas own the Bills and the Sabres. The Bills got to the playoffs this year. They had a very successful year in the NFL. How much pressure does that put on the Sabres franchise as well? Because that's what's expected now. I mean, they're the Pegulas. Look, you might not have any pro teams left in Buffalo if it weren't for them. And they're trying to make it better, and they're trying to get that fan base engaged. The success of the NFL, how much does that put heat on the NHL?
You wonder. I mean, the Bills have now made playoffs through the last 3 years. The Sabres have the longest current drought in the league. Don't seem very close, even though they have some talent on the roster. Don't seem to know what they're doing, how to build a winning team. I think one of the issues is, in football, you've got the GM, Brandon Beane, and the coach, Sean McDermott, and they haven't really found their equivalent to McDermott and Beane in hockey, and they're hoping it's Kruger and Botterill, but we don't know that. And until they find that combination, they're not going to get there. And I do think there's some pressure now because I think people are going to go and spend their money on Bills tickets and they're going to jump ship on the Sabres tickets here. I do fear what the arena might look like next year after another non-playoff season. So they have a lot of pressure on the outside on them, but there's no more pressure on Terry and Kim Pagula and what they put on themselves. I mean, they are subject to a lot of criticism, and a lot of it's warranted, and a lot of it comes from me. But nobody can deny they want to win. They just have to figure out how to do it.
That is Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. He covers the Sabres and he covers the NHL, and thanks for getting through it with me and living with the glitches to get the information that you were looking for. The Blue Jackets tomorrow afternoon will take on the Sabres. That is a 1 o'clock game at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. Our pregame coverage will start at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon on the Blue Jackets radio network. And in Columbus, you'll be able to hear that game on CD 102.5. Also, you can get it throughout the state of Ohio and parts of West Virginia on the Blue Jackets radio network. As always, you can find it at bluejackets.com and on the Blue Jackets app. The Blue Jackets and the Sabres as the Blue Jackets come out of the break with a back-to-back set tomorrow afternoon in Buffalo, Sunday afternoon in Montreal. Until tomorrow, I'm Bob McElligott saying so long, and thanks for listening to CBJ in 30, presented by Tel Ohio Credit Union.